first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, waiting kind that comes right before something breaks. At 78, you learn the sounds of your own house. The creak of the pine floorboard by the kitchen, the sigh of the old furnace. This morning, it was all wrong. I'd done it at dawn, the way I do most things now. The coffee was brewing, that bitter scent filling the kitchen, and the Montana sky outside the window was just turning from black to a deep, bruised purple. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but my mind was clear, crystal clear. I'd laid them both out on the oak table, side by side. 2 wills. 2 futures. Both written by my own hand on those yellow legal pads I've always used. One was for Clint, my nephew. It left him the ranch, the land, every last acre and animal. It was the expected thing, the family thing. The other was my truth. It left everything to the community foundation to fund the youth agricultural program Cody and I had dreamed up for years. It was the legacy I actually wanted to leave. I turned my back for maybe a minute, just to pour a cup of that terrible strong coffee. When I turned around, the chill hit me in the chest before my eyes even understood. There were 2 sheets of paper. Now there was one. I set the mug down, the clunk too loud in the quiet. I walked over, my boots sounding hollow. I didn't need to pick it up. I could see the slant of my own handwriting from here. I, Wyatt James, being of sound mind. It was Clint's will, the one that gave him everything, the charitable will, the one that mattered, was just gone, vanished, like it had never been there at all. The empty space on the worn oak table stared back at me, a perfect rectangle of clean wood where the paper had been. My heart wasn't pounding. It was sinking, like a stone in a cold well. This wasn't a mistake. You don't misplace a single sheet of paper from a pair. Someone had been in my house. Someone had taken the future I chose and left the one that served them. The dawn light was getting stronger, slicing through the window and falling right across that single remaining page. It looked so innocent, just a piece of paper, but it was a declaration of war, left on my own kitchen table. I looked from it to the door, then out to the ranch where the shadows were just starting to lift. Clint had been here, and he'd made his first move. Wyatt's voice. You know, out here on the ranch, you get a lot of time to think. The silence isn't empty. It's full of memories. And lately one memory kept playing on a loop. The last time my nephew Clint visited. He didn't ask about the old mare's arthritis, or if we'd finally fixed the leak in the bunkhouse roof. No, his eyes were on the land, calculating. He only ever talked about future planning and managing assets. Felt less like family and more like an appraisal. I was stewing on this over a bad cup of coffee at the kitchen table when my old friend Cody showed up. Cody's been the county vet for 40 years. He's better with animals than people, which means he's a pretty good judge of character in both. You look like you just found a snake in your boot, Wyatt, he said, helping himself to the coffee pot and making a face at my brew. It's Clint, I sighed, laying it out plain. I got no kids. This land, it's my life's work. But I got this cold feeling he's just waiting for the reading of the will to show his true colors. Cody took a slow sip, his eyes, wise and tired, fixed on the horizon out my window. Well, he drawled, only one way to know for sure what a man's made of. You gotta see what he does when he thinks the prize is already won. A test. The idea settled in the room between us. It felt a little deceitful, and I ain't a deceitful man, but this was about more than money. It was about legacy. Was my legacy just a bank account to my only living kin? What'd you have in mind? I asked. Cody just shrugged. You're the one with the pen. Write the story. Write 2 of them. After he left, the silence felt different. Purposeful. I pulled out a pad of that yellow legal paper I use for figuring cattle feed costs. At the top of the first page, I wrote, Last Will and Testament of Wyatt James. My hand was steady. I left everything, the ranch, the stock, the savings, to Clint. I signed it with a flourish, a bitter taste in my mouth. Then I turned to a fresh sheet, same heading. But this time I wrote that my entire estate, every last acre and dime, was to be donated to the Yellowstone Wildlife Conservation Alliance, a charity that's been trying to protect the wild heart of this country since before I was born. This signature came easier. I laid the 2 documents side by side on the worn pine table. 2 futures. 2 completely different versions of my ending. One for a blood relative who might see me as a transaction. The other for a wild place that wouldn't know my name, but would carry a piece of my spirit forward. The test was set. Now, I just had to wait for Clint to take it. Alright, so I'm going to tell you about the day I decided to play a very dangerous game of chess, and my brother Clint was the king I was trying to checkmate. It was a Tuesday morning. The sun was way too bright for the thoughts in my head. I had the two wills right there on my kitchen table, 2 sheets of yellow legal paper that felt heavier than bricks. One left everything to family, the other to charity. And by family, let's be honest, we all knew that meant Clint would try to grab it all. My phone buzzed. It was Cody. "You still on for fishing?" he asked, his voice all easygoing like it always is. "Yeah, man, leaving now," I said, my eyes glued to those papers. And that's when the idea hit me. It was reckless, maybe stupid, but I had to plant the seed. I deliberately left both wills right there in the open, next to my coffee mug. Anyone walking in would see them. I grabbed my gear, headed out to the truck, and that's when I made the call. I dialed Clint. He answered on the second ring, his voice slick with that fake charm. "Wyatt, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Hey, just thinking out loud," I said, pulling out of the driveway. I made my voice sound tired, conflicted. "I've been working on the will, Dad's estate. It's eating me up." I could almost hear him leaning in on the other end. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah, I've got 2 versions here. One follows the old man's last rant about giving back, leaving a chunk to the community foundation. The other keeps it all in the family. For Mom, for us." I let a long pause hang in the air, the static of the phone line filling the space. "I just don't know, Clint. Charity or family? I can't decide. It's all just sitting on my table, staring at me." There was a silence from his end, but it was the kind of silence that was loud. I knew what he was thinking. He was calculating, his mind already racing to my kitchen, to that yellow paper. "Well, don't stress yourself out, little brother," he finally said, his tone too smooth. "Family should always come first. You know that. We'll talk later." We hung up. I looked at Cody, who was waiting in his boat at the dock, giving me a wave. I didn't feel good about what I just did. I felt like I'd just tossed a lit match into a dry field. But I also knew Clint. He couldn't resist a secret. And now he thought he knew where one was, just sitting there, unguarded. The whole drive to the lake, my stomach was in knots. I wasn't thinking about fish. I was thinking about a shark, and I'd just poured blood in the water. The game was on, and I had to hope my gamble didn't burn my own house down. The sun was setting behind the pines, casting long shadows across the driveway, as Cody and I pulled in from the lake. The fishing had been good, a quiet few hours where I didn't think about the house, the money, or the 2 pieces of yellow legal paper sitting in my desk drawer. I sent Cody home with a cooler full of trout for his family and headed inside, the silence of the big empty house immediately pressing in. I went straight to the study. A cold, instinctual dread had been building in my gut since we'd turned onto the property. Something felt off. I slid open the desk drawer. My breath caught. There was only one will. The top sheet, the one that left everything to charity, the one I'd written last, the one that felt right, was gone. Only Clint's will remained, the one that named him the sole beneficiary. I frantically shuffled through the other papers in the drawer, my hands starting to shake. Nothing. It had simply vanished. "No, no, no," I whispered to the empty room. I'd locked the house. I'd told no one but Cody they were here. The panic was a live wire in my chest. Without that second will, it was just my word against Clint's, and he had a signed document. I had nothing. The sound of a truck engine cut through my spiraling thoughts. I looked out the window to see Clint's familiar beat-up Ford rumbling up the drive. He wasn't due for a visit. He never just stopped by. By the time I met him at the front door, I'd shoved the remaining will back into the drawer. But I knew my face was pale, my eyes wide. "Wyatt," he boomed, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd check on you. You look tired. Everything okay?" His concern was too thick, too syrupy. It set my teeth on edge. "I'm fine, Clint," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "Just a long day." He stepped inside without being invited, his eyes doing a slow sweep of the hallway, lingering toward the study door. "You sure? Cody mentioned you've been a little preoccupied, stressed about the future, about all this." He gestured vaguely at the house around us. "Estate planning is a big burden for one man. It can lead to confusion, to mistakes." The word mistakes hung in the air. He was looking right at me, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He was telling me he knew. He was telling me the charitable will was gone, and that I was now confused. An old man who couldn't keep his papers straight. No confusion here, Clint, I lied, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Everything is exactly where it should be. His smile didn't waver. It was the smile of a man holding a winning hand he wasn't ready to play yet. Glad to hear it, brother. Glad to hear it. You just let me know if you need any help. Organizing things. He stayed for another 20 minutes, talking about nothing, his presence a toxic cloud in the living room. The whole time I could feel the weight of that single remaining will in the next room. It was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a trap, and Clint had just sprung it. And he'd made sure I watched him do it. The air in my uncle's house felt heavy, thick with dust and secrets. Cody and I moved through the silent living room, our footsteps the only sound. We weren't just family here anymore. We were detectives on a mission, and the mission was to prove Clint had destroyed the only thing that could stop him. Start with the obvious places, I whispered to Cody, my voice barely carrying in the stale air. Anywhere you'd burn something you didn't want found. I began, pulling books from shelves, flipping through pages, hoping to find the will. The real one, the one that left everything to charity, stashed somewhere. But with each empty shelf, my hope dimmed. Clint was too smart for that. He wouldn't hide it, he'd destroy it. I heard Cody kneel by the fireplace. A minute passed, then I heard his sharp intake of breath. Wyatt. I was at his side in an instant. He was sifting through the cold, gray ashes with careful fingers. Then he held up his hand. Pinched between his thumb and forefinger were 3 or 4 tiny, brittle fragments of paper, no bigger than confetti, but they weren't white. They were a distinct, faded yellow. Legal pad paper, Cody said, his voice tight. The wills were on yellow legal paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. We both knew what this meant. This wasn't just some old grocery list or newspaper. This was the evidence. Clint had burned the charitable will right here, trying to turn it into nothing but forgotten dust. He'd almost succeeded, but he'd missed these fragments, these silent witnesses to his crime. I carefully took one of the flakes, placing it in a clean plastic bag I'd brought. It felt like holding a piece of my uncle's last betrayed wish. This is it, I said, the words feeling both like a victory and a tragedy. This is how we start. But we needed more. We needed him to admit it. That's when I pulled the small wireless camera from my bag. It was about the size of a matchbox. We put this here, I said, pointing to the top of the bookshelf facing the main sitting area. He holds court in here. If he's going to boast or slip up, it'll be in this room. Working quickly, Cody kept watch by the window while I secured the camera, angling it just right. I checked the feed on my phone, a clear, wide view of the armchair where Clint always held his meetings. The room looked innocent, peaceful even. But now it was a trap. We stood back, looking at our handiwork. The ashes were proof of the act. Now we just needed the confession. The house felt different now. It wasn't just a place of mourning, it was a crime scene, and we had just planted the first piece of our own justice. The quiet felt charged, like the calm before a storm. We had the fragments. Now we waited for the man. Wyatt's POV. I was coming back from town, a bag of groceries in my arm, when I saw the plume of gray smoke curling from my chimney. My blood ran cold. I never lit a fire in the middle of the day. I never lit a fire at all anymore, not since the first will disappeared. I dropped the bag on the porch and pushed the front door open. It was unlocked. The smell of burnt paper hit me first. That specific, acrid scent I'd come to dread. And there he was, Clint, standing in front of my stone fireplace, my spare key dangling from his finger like some kind of trophy. "Afternoon, Wyatt," he said, not even bothering to turn around fully. He was watching the last blackened fragments curl and disintegrate in the flames. "Just checking in. Place was looking a little cluttered." My eyes darted past him to the bookshelf by the window. My grandmother's old Bible lay on the floor, its pages splayed open. He'd found it. I'd been so careful. After he burned the first copy of my new will, the one leaving everything to the town's historical society, cutting him out completely, I'd written a second. I'd hidden it in the hollowed-out pages of that Bible, a place I thought was sacred. Even to a man like Clint, I could see the yellow corner of a legal pad, untouched on my desk. The draft. But the final signed copy was gone. He'd known. He'd always known where I'd hide things, ever since we were kids playing hide and seek on this same property. He'd just let himself in and helped himself to my future. "You had no right," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, choked by the smoke and the betrayal. "Right?" Clint finally turned, a cold, satisfied smile on his face. He tossed the spare key onto my coffee table. It landed with a final metallic clink. "I have every right. This is family. You're not thinking clearly, Wyatt. All that money, that land, going to strangers, to a building, it's an illness. I'm just protecting what's ours." He walked past me toward the door, pausing to look at the groceries spilled on the porch. "You should be more careful. Wouldn't want anything else to disappear." Then he was gone, his truck kicking up gravel in the driveway. I stood there staring at the dying fire. The evidence was gone again. But as the last ember winked out, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. He'd shown me his hand completely. He thought he'd won. He thought burning my words meant they never existed. But I remembered every line, every clause. And as I picked up the Bible from the floor, gently closing its covers, I knew. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the fight. You don't get to burn the truth twice. All right, so there we were, Cody and me, in my quiet living room with the weight of what we were about to do pressing down on us. I looked at the 2 wills Clint had forced me to sign, those yellow legal pages feeling like evidence of my own weakness. But not tonight. "We need a decoy," I said to Cody, my voice low. "Something to make him show his hand." I pulled out a fresh sheet from the same yellow legal pad. My hand was steady as I began to write. This wasn't a document of fear. It was a trap. I wrote a 3rd will. In it, I left everything. The house, the savings, my dad's old coin collection. Not to family, but to the local animal rescue charity. I made sure the language was clear, final, and absolutely infuriating for someone like Clint. "He's going to lose his mind when he sees this," Cody muttered, reading over my shoulder. "That's the point," I said, signing my name with a flourish. I didn't date it. I wanted it to look like it could have been written at any time. Now for the staging. I didn't hide it. I left it right in the center of the kitchen table, the most obvious place in the house. Then I took a sticky note and scribbled a reminder to myself in big, clear letters. "Mail copies to attorney first thing tomorrow." I stuck it right on top of the will. We stepped back and looked at the scene. The single sheet of yellow paper, that damning note on top. It was a perfect lure. It screamed of a decision made, of a final stroke that would cut Clint out completely and forever. Cody cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp in the quiet house. "He'll come for it. He can't help himself." I nodded, feeling a cold focus settle over me. The fear was still there, buzzing in the background, but it was being overtaken by a resolved calm. We weren't victims waiting in this house anymore. We were the ones who had set the bait. We knew exactly what Clint wanted. To control everything, to own my life even after I was gone. This fake will was the ultimate rejection of that control. "Okay," I said, turning to Cody, my ally, my brother in this mess. "He'll see it. He'll have to make a move, and we'll be ready." We didn't say much else. We just started preparing. We checked the locks on the doors, not to keep him out necessarily, but to control how he came in. We made sure our phones were charged and within reach. The plan was simple. Let the decoy do its work, and then confront him. No more hiding, no more scared signatures on yellow paper. The stage was set. The fake will was on the table, a piece of paper holding all of Clint's greed and frustration. All we had to do now was wait for the curtain to rise. The air in my living room felt thick enough to cut with a knife. I stood by the fireplace, my heart hammering against my ribs. Cody was a solid, silent presence near the door, and Sheriff Miller leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. We were all waiting. The only sound was the low hum of the television, its screen dark. Then headlights swept across the front window. A car door slammed. My stomach tightened into a hard knot. This was it. Clint didn't bother knocking. He just pushed the front door open, his usual swagger in full force, a smug smile already plastered on his face. "Wyatt, figured you'd be home. We need to have a talk about that new document you've been waving around." He stopped short when he saw the sheriff. His eyes flicked from the lawman to Cody, and finally back to me. The smile didn't fade, but it hardened. "What's all this? A family meeting?" "Something like that," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I picked up the remote from the mantel. "We've been expecting you, Clint." "See, I had a feeling someone might try to come take, what wasn't theirs. So I got a little camera installed. Good. Clear one. Points right at Grandpa's old desk. His smugness cracked just for a second. A flicker of something cold and sharp passed behind his eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's clear it up then. I pressed a button on the remote. The TV screen flickered to life. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 nights ago. The black and white image was crystal clear. It showed my grandfather's study, the old oak desk. And there was Clint, moving with a furtive, guilty speed. He pulled open the drawer, rummaged, and then his hands closed around the 2 sheets of yellow legal paper. He held them up, comparing. With a decisive, cruel motion, he fed one of them, the newer one, the one leaving the bulk of the estate to the town's charity fund, into the old metal trash can by the desk. He lit a match. The flame caught, curling the paper, turning the careful, charitable words into black ash. I hit pause. The image froze, Clint's face illuminated by the small, destructive fire. The room was dead silent. Clint stared at the screen, his jaw working. Then he let out a short, forced laugh. You don't understand, Wyatt. This is what had to be done. It was a mistake. Grandpa was confused. He was being taken advantage of by those charity vultures. I was protecting the family, protecting our interests, keeping his legacy in the family where it belongs. I just looked at him. All the anger, the betrayal, the weeks of suspicion settled into a cold, clear certainty. You weren't protecting family, Clint. You were stealing from him, from all of us, and from this whole town. I nodded to Sheriff Miller, who pushed himself off the wall. Clint Eastman, the sheriff said, his voice calm and official. You're under arrest for the destruction of a legal document. You have the right to remain silent. As the sheriff read him his rights, Clint's protest turned from bluster to a desperate, wheedling tone, still trying to sell his story. But the evidence was right there, burning on the screen for all of us to see. The truth finally was out in the open, and it had caught him red-handed. The sheriff's words hung in the air of my father's old study, so solid you could almost touch them. Destroying a will, Clint, he said, his voice calm but ironclad, is a felony. That's not a civil matter. That's a crime. I watched Clint's face. All that bluster, that performative anger he'd worn like armor since the funeral, just drained away. It was replaced by something pale and calculating, his eyes darting from the sheriff's badge to the 2 yellow legal papers on the desk, and finally to me. The whole greedy performance had been for this moment, and he'd just been handed the bill. My brother Cody stood beside me, a solid, quiet presence. He gave me a slight nod. This was it. I took a step forward, my own heart beat loud in my ears. I looked not at Clint, but at the sheriff and the family lawyer who'd witnessed this whole ugly scene. Then let's make it absolutely clear, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. As of this moment, I, Wyatt, hereby revoke any and all previous wills and testaments. Every single one. I picked up the newer will, the one my dad had written in secret, the one Clint hadn't managed to burn. I held it up. This is the only valid last will and testament of our father. The only one. The room was silent. You could hear the old clock ticking on the mantel. The community was all here, in a way. The sheriff, the lawyer, our few remaining relatives who'd come to pay respects and stayed to see the drama unfold. In a town this small, news like this wouldn't just travel. It would be etched into memory. Clint didn't say a word. No more arguments. No more lies about what Dad really wanted. The truth was right there on that yellow paper, and he'd been caught trying to erase it. He was disinherited. Completely. And now he wasn't just walking away empty-handed. He was walking away with the sheriff's words about felonies ringing in his ears, facing potential charges that everyone in this room had just witnessed the grounds for. He turned on his heel, a defeated man, his true nature, plain unvarnished greed, exposed for the whole town to see. He didn't look at me or Cody. He just left, closing the front door with a soft, final click that felt louder than any slam. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Cody put a hand on my shoulder. It was over. The fight was done. The paper in my hand felt light. But the weight that had been on my chest for weeks was finally gone. The last of the sun is bleeding out over the Yellowstone, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, and I can't think of a better place to be. I take a slow sip of my coffee, the chair creaking under me, as I settle back. Cody's in the chair next to me, quiet, just watching the same big sky. It's been months. Months since the dust settled, since the lawyers finished their talking, since the last trace of Clint was scrubbed from this land. The memory of those 2 yellow legal papers, his forgery and my real one, doesn't sting anymore. It just feels distant, like a bad storm you watched roll over the far ridge, knowing your roof was sound. Quiet, Cody says, not looking at me. It's not a question. The good kind, I answer. And it is. The only sounds are the sigh of the wind through the bunchgrass and the distant cry of a hawk. The ranch stretches out before us. Every fence post, every grazing horse, every shadow in the coulee is finally, completely mine again. But more importantly, I know what happens to it when I'm not. I nod toward the house. Final papers came back from Cheyenne today. All recorded, all sealed. Cody just grunts, but I see the corner of his mouth twitch. He knows what it means. He was there through all of it, after all. He saw the panic, the rage, the long nights wondering if a piece of paper could really steal a man's life's work. That other will, Clint's desperate, greedy scribble on that same yellow paper, is nothing but ash now. What's filed in the county courthouse is mine. Simple, clear, and ironclad. This land, every acre of it, doesn't go to some distant relative or get carved up by developers. When my time comes, the whole spread goes to the Northern Plains Conservation Trust. It becomes a preserve. The bison will keep grazing. The creek will keep running. It'll never be a subdivision, never be strip mined, never be anything but what it is. I feel a peace so deep it's like a physical weight lifting off my chest. Clint wanted to consume this place, to turn it into money. In the end, all he did was make me see how to protect it forever. The sun dips finally behind the mountains, leaving the world in a cool blue twilight. The first star winks into view over the pasture. Gonna be a cold one, Cody murmurs, pushing himself up from his chair. Yeah, I say, staying put for a moment longer. I look out at the darkening land. My land for now, and then forever everyone's. The fight is over. The story is written. And for the first time in a long, long while, the ending is exactly right.